Malay yields back, and I'll now go. We won't talk about what happens in Blacksburg, but I'll recognize a gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Griffith.
It was a sad, wet day. That's all I can say. Sad, wet day. All right, so let me pick up with this appliance thing because I'm sitting here listening, and that's one of the reasons I like to be in here, and I apologize I wasn't in here sooner, juggling all kinds of things. But I heard Mr. Palmer's talking about how his family was poor and that they used coal in a stove. And I'm going to start with you, Mr. Lieberman, but Mr. Mesner might get your input on this too. Here's the concern I have. Representing a coal-producing region where if you're driving down in the mountains of southwest Virginia, there's some coal. It might not be the hottest burning coal, but it's right there on the side of the road. And most everybody in a small community is going to know where there's an old mine that's you can get into if you work at it a little bit. If we keep making the price of these appliances go up and we don't let people use affordable appliances, isn't it only reasonable to expect that poor folks are going to do what they need to do and they're going to find that coal, whether it's on the side of the road or not? And I dare say not a sheriff in Southwest Virginia would stop somebody who's on the side of the road collecting poor quality coal, but if they can burn it, they will. Isn't that what we're pushing these people towards?
Well, certainly when appliances become more expensive, that's very, very difficult for low-income households. And it's not just a higher cost, they have higher financing to pay for them. So this is a hardship for low-income households.
Yeah, and I don't see, I mean, it seems very uncaring to make this stuff cost so much when we've done tremendous amount to clean up the air and the water of our country already. I'm not saying we can't do more, but we do need to take into account the cost. Would you not agree with that, Mr. Mesner?
I agree with 100%. So one example, clothes washers, the DOE proposed rule, DOE's own data would have said that it would increase the clothes washer by $150. But it's not just appliance standards where this comes into play. There's also a lot of things. I'll give another example. California is about to enact a bill that will add about $300 to a clothes washer by forcing a filter to go on it. So that would essentially double the cost of an entry point product for a clothes washer that the low income household might rely on in order to buy a new clothes washer into the future. So it's an onslaught of really regulations that or proposed regulations and legislation that goes too far across the country, quite honestly, that we have to deal with.
Well, and people just aren't going to pay attention to some of these regulations. They're going to find ways to work around it. Now, you're not going to be washing any clothes with coal, but I will tell you, the last round of regulations on washing machines, I had a lady out of Bluefield, Virginia, who told me she was putting a hose into her washing machine to give it the extra water because the machine wouldn't allow it in because of the new regs. So she put a hose in there to redo it. I wrote a column about that. I do a weekly column. Wrote a column about that when these new regulations came out and said, I guess we're going to see more of that. And I got several responses from constituents that said, oh, yeah, we're doing that too. So, I mean, sometimes you just take these things to the point of absurdity and people, good common sense people, are going to figure a way around it. Or they're going to wash their clothes a lot more, one of the two. I mean, that's, or they're not going to be able to afford it and they go to the laundromat when they can afford it and unfortunately are not able to wear clean garments on all occasions. All right, I had never planned to go in that direction. I was originally going to Mr. Pauling just to talk about the fact that there have been more than 220 coal plants that have closed since 2014, and while a lot of that was replaced with natural gas, some of that capacity was replaced with wind and solar. And I think you hit it on the head in your testimony when you said, the problem is our timelines aren't matching up. We're getting rid of the coal-fired power plants. Now they're after the natural gas plants, claiming we're going to bring in all these new ways to create power, and our timelines are not matching up. So in light of that, how has the closure of dispatchable power plants affected your members?
Well, we've been fortunate enough to stay just ahead of it, but we're very close to that threshold right now. My contention is it's pretty simple, common sense. Don't shut a generation station down, no matter what the fuel, until you get adequate replacement plus reserves. Then shut it down. But that takes time, that takes effort. One of we're in the Santee Cooper Balancing Authority. We buy power from Santee Cooper and Duke Energy. Santee Cooper's got a coal generating station that they want to shut down, and we just can't do it yet because every time there's been a large load event, whether it be hot or cold, those 4 coal plants at that generating station are running around the clock. So we can't close them down, but what they have to do is they have to go through some permitting to get the effluent water taken care of. So we need to go to those, go ahead and go through those exercises and get it done so we can continue to burn that coal and keep lights on until, again, adequate replacement generation is up and running, plus reserves. Reserves meaning that if a generator goes down, then you got room so you won't have a blackout. The way it all works is all these transmission systems are tied together, and if the frequency drops below, then they're going to automatically disconnect and leave that utility on an island, and it's that blackout for everyone. So
Yeah.
all that's got to be taken care of.
That makes common sense to me, but unfortunately, the Biden administration doesn't consider all of the consequences when the men and women in the ivory towers come up with some of these rules. I yield back.